Hi, my name is Dave Wilkin. I'm the coordinator of jazz studies at the University of North Carolina at Asheville and also a freelance trombonist. In two earlier video presentations about brass embouchures, I demonstrated how the mouthpiece placement determines the direction the airstream is blown past the lips into the mouthpiece, and also discussed how the best mouthpiece placement for a brass musician is dependent on the player's physical characteristics. In this short video, I'll be discussing another important element of the brass embouchure that is also dependent on the individual's anatomy. If you look closely enough, you will notice that all brass players push and pull their lips along the teeth with the mouthpiece when changing registers. The mouthpiece placement doesn't move, but the exact position of the lips and mouthpiece to the teeth will change. Some musicians, like this trumpet player, will push the mouthpiece and lips together up to ascend and pull down to descend. Others, like myself, pull the mouthpiece and lips together down to ascend and push up to descend. The motion can be very obvious, or it can be quite minimal and difficult to spot without watching very closely while the musician plays large intervals. The exact reasons why brass players will use this embouchure motion are still unclear, but it is a necessary and important part of a brass musician's embouchure. In spite of this, most players are completely unaware that they make this motion at all. Brass musicians who place the mouthpiece with around 75% or more upper lip inside the cup will almost always push the mouthpiece and lips up to ascend and pull the mouthpiece and lips down to descend. This motion can be observed on players of all brass instruments, including tuba. Because the tuba is held on the lap, tubists will make the embouchure motion through a combination of moving the body and instrument. This tubist also pushes the mouthpiece and lips together up to the nose to ascend, and pulls them down to descend. This horn player also uses the same embouchure motion. He has some side-to-side deviation in its direction, which is fairly common and necessary for some players. While players who place the mouthpiece higher on the lips usually push up to ascend, players who place the mouthpiece somewhat lower will usually do the reverse. This trumpet player places the mouthpiece with more upper lip and blows the airstream down into the cup, like the other examples. Unlike the higher placement players, he pulls the mouthpiece and lips down to ascend and pushes up to descend. Brass musicians who place the mouthpiece low enough on the lips so that there is more lower lip inside the mouthpiece cup play with an upstream embouchure. Upstream players almost always pull the mouthpiece and lips together down to ascend and push them up to descend, like this upstream trumpet player. My embouchure motion also has some side-to-side deviation. I pull the mouthpiece and lips together down and to my left to ascend, and push up and to the right to descend. Most brass players are unaware of their embouchure motion. Before fine-tuning the way their embouchure motion functions, it's necessary to learn whether the player will play best through pushing up or pulling down to ascend. One of the best ways to test is to have the musician slur large intervals and try both types of embouchure motion. It can also be a good demonstration on the importance of the correct embouchure motion. This trombonist places the mouthpiece with a lot more upper lip than lower lip inside, which predicts that he'll play best by pushing up to ascend. To be certain that this was correct, I asked him to try the opposite motion, which chokes off his sound and makes it more difficult for him to play. Pushing the mouthpiece and lips together up towards the nose doesn't work well for this upstream trumpet player. Pulling down works much better, even causing her to overshoot the G. Pulling down and slightly to her right side works best. With a little observation to guide practice, brass players can discover inconsistencies in their embouchure motion that often cause playing difficulties. One common dysfunction in the brass embouchure motion is using too much motion to play in a particular direction, usually in one of the extreme ends of a player's range. This trombonist pushes up to ascend and pulls down to descend. Notice, however, that the distance he pulls down to descend an octave is greater than the amount he pushes up to ascend an octave. When he goes to play in the pedal register here, he pulls way too far down and misses the note entirely. While exceptions may exist, it's a good rule of thumb to try to make the embouchure motion function so that the amount of motion used to ascend and descend the same interval is the same amount, just in the opposite direction. If angular deviations in the embouchure motion are present, the track the mouthpiece and lips are pulled along the teeth should be in a straight line and not hook off in a different direction at some point in the player's range. An embouchure motion that moves side to side as well as up and down is fairly common. Due to anatomical features like the shape of the teeth and jaw, it's typical for these players to want to alter their horn angle slightly to one side or another at the same time. This trumpet player correctly plays with an unusually large angular deviation in his embouchure motion, but he normally plays with a horn angle that is consistently straightforward. With an ascending octave slur, it's a little difficult to see if bringing more mouthpiece weight onto one side works better, but when he brings his angle slightly to his left side, the high C is flat. Bringing the horn angle towards his right side makes the C more in tune. To check to see if this is correct, I asked him to experiment with a descending octave slur. Bringing his horn angle slightly to his left side makes for the most open and in tune low C, and putting more mouthpiece weight on his right side definitely doesn't work. It's likely that a little practice learning exactly how much weight to move from one side to another when changing registers will make for improved flexibility and playing ease. This trumpet player struggles with the upper register. Her embouchure motion appears to work best by pulling down into her left side to ascend. Experimenting with bringing the horn angle slightly to her left side while ascending and slightly to her right while descending makes for an improved sound and makes it feel easier to play.
Yeah, that's it. That looks good. Sounds good too. Does that feel easier to play?
Yeah.
I hope that you found this video presentation on the brass embouchure motion interesting and helpful. Again, the most important consideration for teachers and players should be to work towards making the embouchure function correctly with the player's unique anatomy and not against it. Analysis and correctional work should always take place only in the teaching studio and practice room, so that the musician's full attention can be placed on making music at all other times.